Mhm. Okay, so we are online, we are recording, not streaming, no worries. So only open to the people who are inside this so-called room. Very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining actually our first after inauguration session meeting of our School of Mutation. My name is Dmitry Vilensky and I will be kind of mediating, moderating this talk. I'm part of Что делать Collective, also artist, and I'm very happy that today with us Alexandra Pirici, very important artist, comrade, and person who actually contributed a lot to trigger this debate which we would like to do today. And as I said, IRI, it's Institute of Radical Imagination, and you get here because you all signed into that new project of Institute of Radical Imagination School of Mutation. And maybe it makes sense to say a few words informally, and I'm very happy that we have few members of the Institute with us, like Sarah, Gabriel, and Zenio, so who is helping us to manage in this conversation. So Sarah, please, can you tell a few words who we are, why we start this project, and then I'll focus precisely on this meeting.
Okay. So hello everybody, I am Sara Buraya, I'm speaking from Madrid and I'm part of the IRI since it started. It was on 2017, so some years ago, and the IRI basically is kind of a network, a platform, or a space of sharing in which different people that came from arts, but like artists or curators, cultural workers from institutions or independent, but also activists working in different fields, are related and come together and let's say in a space in which art, politics, and commons intercross. No? And I would say also that the IRI, even if it started and is mainly Mediterranean, geopolitically indeed, even if that is a major thing, we also have this kind of other satellites that put us, no? Like for example, Dmitry from Russia or the BHB team were also with us from the beginning of the meetings. And it started as a platform. We have gathered in different nodes of this network, interacting with root-based projects in that city or in the place where we meet, and having like research programs with them and trying to collect and to put together experiences that have commonalities in these different spaces. And so we started in Naples in 2017, meeting in L'Asilo. One particularity is that we are very related with the different urban commons, so to speak. And there has been also a meeting in Madrid, in Ingobernable. We have been also in Athens, working with the Solidarity Schools networks. And in all these different, through all these different meetings and collective interventions and projects, we have been creating this network that now symbolically, and then Dmitry can explain, with the COVID, with the pandemic situation, have mutated into another form, which is the one you are from your different places gathering now. So thank you so much. I think as an introduction, good work, Dmitry.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, it's very important initiative for the whole institute, because it brings all us together. Because as Sarah said, we are split to different locations, but at the same time, we conceived the form of the school where we could build new immediate communities and new constituencies, which actually help to share the different traumatic experiences of recent times. That's why actually I'm more responsible and trying to contribute as more as I can to different iteration and tracks of that school. But at the same time, as an artist, I thought it's important to approach different topics from artistic perspective, from art making. And it really very, for me, it's very urgent things because we see how the art world is changing and we don't know how it will be changed in next, yeah, we are in complete uncertainties. It's my personal impression. Speaking from Russia, trying to follow all that kind of new trends and new articulations. And so this is a focus of my so-called iteration. And also I suggested to call, we have a situation here. What does it mean for me? It means that there is a certain unresolved conflict or problem, openly in English, if you think about it. So, and right now I conceived with the help of our comrades from IRIS for our discussion 3 panels, and I'm very happy to start with one, or we call it assemblies also, one of transformation of monumentality. Monumentality is a very weird word. So maybe those who didn't so much get into that kind of discourse, it comes to Henri Lefebvre, who actually used this particular term, but also it was very often used in kind of Soviet propaganda, Soviet type of aesthetic um, consideration. So, and I'm kind of, I need to write, and I think it makes sense to think in this way, and also it's immediately bring us into discussion how memorials, monuments connected to the politics of commemoration. So this kind of key things, and also the main conflict comes from that the power to commemorate usually belongs to the bigger power, who put everywhere these monuments to their kind of criminal past, but at the same time also still control distribution of the space. And actually in this case, the production of the space through creation of the squares and memorial places where monuments can be placed, it's really big and serious issue. And what we'll see, and I mentioned in that a call for text to this panel, that actually this kind of commissions keep on producing, like Louvre and French Ministry of Culture right now commission huge monument to victims of racism, and the idea of public commissions of more monuments and what to do with empty pedestals. So how the space will be reorganized when they fall down or removed by the power which is not disappear. So we actually have a lot of speculation about how this transformation was done through period of revolution like Russian Revolution or different uprising where the power radically changed. Right now we have popular uprising, people really claim the space, but at the same time, they have to deal with more or less the same structures of the power, which transform it, but how transform, what kind of claim to transform them we should make. So I hope you, I don't really want to give into that text. I hope it was short and was enough so to read. But same time, I would like to share with you one collection because I'm really freak. I'm collecting different kind of pictures from internet, showing different type of transformation of spaces, of performative monumentality, of alternative monuments, realized in different contexts by different artists, sometimes without artists, and actually the question which we could raise and tackle here today, do we need artists for this transformation? Or maybe people's imagination and their desire, like it happened in Seattle Autonomous Zone when they create altar to the dead people, victims of racism, is already there. But the temporality, what we can do with that kind of permanent transformation, which with a way iteration which happened maybe a few days before. So do we need as an artist, oh, sorry, I have to really also accept people, which also it's the same problem between tactics and strategy. So with the tactical things, we'll see people come and claim, you know, and destroy something or build a temporary monument. But at the same time, what kind of vision, the strategy we as an artist can contribute together with this movement. So let me try to show you, to share my screen and show you some pics, so hope it will be quite quickly. So there's a, just a moment, just a moment. Okay, I think I'm here. Oh, ah, yeah. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, you see. So it just kind of Flickr album. So sometimes I'm coming with a very kind of, I'll make it closer, yeah. So actually, this is, how it's called, styled. So it was actually old Christian tradition when some people stay for many, many years, like Simeon Stylites. The elder who climbed on a pillar in Syria 423rd and remained there staying until his death, 37 years. So it's quite weird example. Yeah, but at the same time, people kind of repeating and a day of Victory Day commemorate and actually question certain kind of Russian contemporary rituals of commemoration in such way, then I think maybe many of you remember Piotr Pawlensky, who performed his monument fixation on Red Square, nailed his scrotum, his balls in front of the Kremlin wall. It became kind of iconic image of that kind of performative monumentality. This image is also quite interesting because it depicts Snowden, Assange, and Manning. But what is important here is they left a fourth chair where everyone can come and kind of claim their position with this kind of heroes. It was actually realized on Alexander Platz. Of course, it was also temporary. This image you might many knows because it long-standing protester in Istanbul during Gezi Park. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the artist who started, but it then became viral. Yeah,
Erdem Gündüz.
Erdem Gündüz, thank you so
Erdem
much.
Gündüz.
So then we have Alexandra Pirici with her one of first, if you don't want us, we want you. So it was realized sculpture in expanded field in 2011, almost 10 years ago already. So then I'd like to show you image of Anatoly Osmolovsky sitting on shoulder of Mayakovsky. Was also kind of a iconic image how to perform that rigid monumentality. Then actually very important work by Alfredo Jarre, The Light in the City. I also would conceive it as a kind of new form of monumentality where there is a cupola in Canada. I think it was in Lights in the City. It was Montreal, yeah.
Montreal.
And actually, yeah. And it was connected with with many shelters for homeless people, because in Canada it's disaster with homelessness. So, and every person who enters the shelter can put the button, and then the red light in the central cupola start to become red, and it was kind of a fire. And actually, during the night, it was almost permanent, and people can really understand the scale of this problem. So I would also consider this. This is by Johann Gertz, anti-monument or counter-monument, but Johann Gertz is one of the key guys who actually reconsiders the concept of monumentality, so that kind of interaction with the monument. This stela, it was disappearing during signature of people. Anyone could sign it, and with level of signing, it goes down and then disappeared completely from the view. So it becomes anti-fascist. What was called? Yeah, Monuments Against Fascism, '86. Yeah. What else we have? This really funny things. Christian Jankowski Heavyweight History, where he actually asked weightlifter, how they call these guys? Professional strongman, professional strongman, yeah, to move around different monuments dedicated to mostly Polish history or kind of post-socialist intervention like you saw Ronald Reagan. Yeah, what else I have in my collection? Ah, this is also from Turkey. Maybe Zeno can tell more, but at the same time, it was work realized for Istanbul Biennial by Wouter Osterholt and Elke Eitentuis. Yeah, and then actually it was one monument dedicated to relation, very dramatic and tragic relation between Armenians and Turks, which was demolished after the visit of Erdogan. And then they uh, pick up replica of the hand, which you'll see in this picture, and move it around Istanbul and trying to establish dialogue with the people. So it was dedicated and bring attention to destruction of monuments through performative action. So what else? I have quite big collection. So this one is actually quite never again. The statue of dictator Alfredo Stroessner, Paraguay dictator. His statue was destroyed, but then transformed into new monument smashed between two concrete blocks. So, but there's some other stuff, but at the same time, maybe I would like to return to another collection of images, which might be also helpful to get into that alternative memorials. For me, that's more about performative one, but this one, I think we should also watch for a few minutes. And here, more kind of new memorials realized in quite rigid form by different artists. And this is Sanya Ivekovic, Lady Rosa of Luxembourg from 2001. It was done in Luxembourg during Manifesta, when she actually put this stela with her monument, which was actually kind of replica of another famous statue in Luxembourg, but same time dedicated and bring attention to completely another image of femininity, pregnancy. This is a very crazy piece by Hans Hake, Kunst bleibt Kunst, art stays art. So when he transformed Watchtower at the death strip between East and West Berlin, and and the motto of this work, freedom is now simply going to be sponsored out of petty cash, and he put a Mercedes sign on the top of that GDR tower. So what else? This very rare piece done by our very good friends, Contrafilé group from Brazil, Monument to Invisible Turnstile, where they change on the pedestal one bust of one kind of man, I don't know. Actually, bust disappeared by itself, and then they put turnstile because it became symbol of control. And this sculpture transformed into comics published in many media, run into big discussion in São Paulo. Mm. This really spooky monument dedicated to Russian raper, soldier, which was contested the memories of Second World War, where was quite hidden history how many Polish and German women was raped by Soviet army. We don't get too much into that story, but at the same time it was temporarily installed. You see, it's quite huge sculpture was next by to real Soviet monument that was removed and artist went on trial. This is also quite recent, I guess. I forgot. Valley. So massive monument to black identity. So it was kind of a replica of kind of typical horse rider monument, but same time the man who's sitting on the horse is a black hero, and it was put on Times Square and also created quite big debate, and actually was commissioned by big American US institution. But this sculpture, the girl in front of the bull, was actually quite famous, but at the same time, we almost forget that actually it was also trigger Occupy Wall Street because it was quite close by, and this became kind of one of the symbols of Occupy Wall Street in US. It was also done illegally and then removed, so, but it was really very interesting. And then we come to very kind of classical situation because there is a four splints in Trafalgar Square, which was empty from 1841 to 1999. Then it became place for the commission, which was done by City of London, and many artists contribute to these commissions, but I would like to put attention to Mark Queen works, Alison Lepper, Pregnant. Actually, we have by chance when I collect this, a little bit organize these images, I notice that we have 3 images of pregnant women. So, and also for me was very interesting that the same statue, replica was used during Olympic Games in London at the opening ceremony. As written here, I was actually following the dancer perform around a replica of a statue. So it was really kind of many dancer, whatever you call it, you'll see that here it's really a lot, who perform a lot enormously enlarged replica of this statue. So this one is a really weird story, my favorite one, that in Monument to Rebellion, but Ron Bergman and Alejandra Salinas. It was actually part of Bergen Triennale in 2014. It was actually minimalist abstract sculpture, which municipality imposed or installed in the city and the place which was famous for Detroit Rebellion of 67. But local people didn't recognize its abstract value, but consider it as a monument to commemorate this rebellion. So it was kind of reclaiming of something which was produced out of the context of uprising and same time received its own rituals and force. So what else I have? It's Russian story, maybe too long to explain, but it was really very interesting action where old Tsarist monument was replaced by Soviet monument to thinkers of monument obelisk to prominent thinkers and leaders of struggle for liberation of the workers. But then very recently it was transformed again into that kind of Tsarist monument. It was restored, but the artist simply bring a pile of books organized exactly in the same order as the name was used at the obelisk. So it create kind of obelisk in with just pile of books and make very powerful symbolic gesture to that transformation. And these images of New Year tree, or how you call it, yeah, New Year tree during Maidan, which was transformed kind of in a monument to uprising. It was central of Maidan Square, which happened exactly around Christmas. It was Christmas tree. This also from Maidan, from Ukraine, some improvised monuments to heroes of Maidan, people who died there, done out of that paper boxes. So, yeah, what else we have here? Ah, this is actually from 89, when during Tiananmen Square, people remember that iconic image of a man standing in front of the tanks, actually also kind of performative monument, especially through the picture, but very rare quoted that actually art students created replica of American Statue of Liberty. And it was during the protest permanently moved through Tiananmen Square. So, and Stoppelsteine, also commemoration of Jews who were sent to deportation camps, and just kind of plaques put into the pavement, and people can just stop there and get a memory of those who were deported. So, and this one, actually, the last one, I would like to finish that memorial, or how to say, altar, because we'll see also, like the previous image, many candles, mourn the dead and fight like hell for the living. So it's quite powerful statement. So it's from Seattle Autonomous Zone. So first thing which they created there was actually this memorial. So which really is, we as an artist feel incredibly inspired, because that kind of aesthetics we feel very close to. So I'm stop showing my demonstration. Hope will give us insight into that kind of myriads of example of different type of walking with that rigid monumentality. And right now, the empty plinths are multiplying, the more performative artists and activists taking part in it. And I'm very happy to pass the floor to Alexandra to talk about her position. Also, recently she published very interesting comments on Facebook. I'm a big fan and permanently following her. And sometimes it really runs into interesting discussions. The same quote from Ruth Nowak. I was trying to invite her, but she's completely exhausted in US. She's running new institutions there in Washington. And she apologized that she can't join us. But if you remember what I was quoting, she was talking about that maybe she doubts that it's so necessary to couple these monuments, and maybe make sense to create new ensembles as a counter monument. So we can also leave it open for our exchange of opinions. So Alexandra, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dmitry, for the invitation, and I'm glad to be here and share this virtual screen floor with everyone. Yeah, I mean, I come from the field of dance and choreography, but I've mostly worked in the visual arts in the past couple of years, more years actually. And the very first work that somehow signaled, let's say, a shift, though I don't really see these fields as separate, but let's say in the art world, there is still this clear separation, more or less, between performing arts, theater, and the visual arts. But a very first work that I made, and that was considered also from a visual art point of view and by different curators, was actually a work in the public space and in relation to to a public monument. But it's a bit of a long story with that. What continued and what I've incorporated into my practice from that very first work, which was actually related to a protest action because of this evacuation of a performing arts institution from the space of the National Theater. This was in 2010, and somehow the reason for this, as given by the Ministry of Culture, was that the theater needs to be rebuilt, and there's no room in this new building for this performing arts center, and there's no money for it. So because of budget cuts for the culture and the arts, this institution that was dedicated to live works and to living forms, let's say, of contemporary art, was supposed to be erased. And at the same time, in the middle of the city, actually right in front of the theater, this huge sculpture had just been erected, and it costed, because the budget was public, it costed around 2 million euros. It was also this one commission for one very well-known sculptor, Romanian sculptor, who works in bronze, has his own workshop. So somehow, you have this possibility to manipulate all the resources, and you get it all somehow. And it was a very big, it wasn't really a monument, it was just a very monumental sculpture. I mean, it wasn't supposed to commemorate a specific historical event, but rather a Romanian dramaturg. Long story short, because it's a long story, I proposed, as part of a protest action against this evacuation of the Performing Arts Center, an action where me, together with some colleagues and other artists, we would we would embody this huge monument in bronze. So the initial intention, let's say, was a bit ironic also, and to say, well, if this is the only form of art, the sort of official art that gets funded and that is allowed to exist, then we can also do it, and we can make a living, cheaper version. And then while we were doing this, because I proposed the action for a couple of days in a row and more hours per day, I came to realize that I'm interested in some things, and I think there is a different kind of potential there. So first interest was also in duration, the idea that when you do something and you interfere with the monument, it's not very short. So you try to do something that is persistent and that let's say, mimics or come close to the temporality of a sculpture in different material through reoccurrence and through persistence with the human body. So this is why we would come back every day, and for a couple of hours every day, we would change groups, but we would try to embody this actually very ugly monument. I don't even have a good photo of that action. And I think it's also because of this, because the sculpture was actually, no, I'm kidding. I didn't really think of documenting at that time. There are some images, but and somehow I also became interested in this tension between the quality of being present live and the quality of the human body and human presence, the scale of the human body, and also the scale of the monument. And I've continued with the action, with the same sort of principle throughout the years in a way. I make work that uses embodiment, so a placing of your body in different situations. And I've been interested in tackling different forms of monumentality also throughout the years. So somehow my interest also shifted from very concrete public monuments to other forms of monumentality. And maybe it's worth also showing a couple of images. It's not really, I'm not showing a portfolio, don't worry. But I think maybe it's just good to just see some images. I'm not gonna talk about each specific work, but just in terms of aesthetic, maybe it's important to be able to grasp a certain interest and a certain kind of aesthetic. Also because I was never interested in really going against the monument. This sort of iconoclastic gestures, let's say, were also never available to me as an artist. So, which you now, when Dmitry was also speaking about this uprisings or this toppling of monuments, they are the product of a collective anger also and force. So I never thought about doing something like that. So the idea was always to add to the monument. In fact, I started calling my works in relation to already existing concrete, visible public monuments, sculptural addition too, because I thought this concept of addition, so the fact that you can change also and you can produce a détournement and a hijacking of the original signification of the monument is important. So you can change it by adding, not by subtracting. But also what another important aspect is that as much as I was interested in the semiotics of the monument, so what does it mean? What does it stand for? Or what is the symbol of this? I think I was following, or I think there are very important aspects that relate to material and to scale. So I think also when we speak of monumentality, even in these concrete public monuments, there's always something about scale. So they're supposed to be big. They're supposed to tower over the viewer. This is the very function of the pedestal, that it brings them up. So you have to look up to them. It's never at the same level. So they create a structure, a vertical structure and a hierarchy. And even, and this means something in cinema, for example, you have this particular cinematic operations, which are defined as being psychological. So they produce something on the viewer when you film something from up towards a subject that is down, then you're supposed to convey this this feeling of power and authority. Or when you film from rakursi, from an angle downwards, and you look up at the subject, you're supposed to convey humility and someone that is being overwhelmed. So this relation between the regular passerby and the monument and the ways history is represented by the monumental is always quite clear, I think, in this use of the pedestal. You're always supposed to respect something that towers and is above you. And then I was interested in some works in also coming on the monument, so reaching or somehow coming close to the scale of the monument, but without producing something big. So again, also because of the medium that I work with mostly with live human bodies and performers. So I was never interested in producing another big object. In terms of a counter monument, I just do something just as big, but with a woman or with, I think it's more interesting to try to subvert or reveal the mechanisms that produce authority and power rather than just replace in terms of representation, right? So now it's something different on top. And again, this is also a question of materiality. I thought it's always interesting how, of course, monumentality, it has, I think, many definitions, but it's definitely related to eternity in many discussions or theories about it. I was also recently reading these 9 points on monumentality of, what's his name? Siegfried Gideon and Fernand Léger. It's a manifesto actually, also about architecture, but they speak about how monumentality is always about eternity and producing something that is eternal and transcends one's own time. And this question of eternity was always somehow, let's say, represented through scale and materialized and embodied through materials. So most of monuments are also made in stone and bronze. And then, so the presence of the human body was also meant to, let's say, to produce or to work with the monument in a different kind of material that is not supposed to be eternal. In fact, it's very fragile. And then again, this question of recurrence and coming back and staying there, or like coming back the next day and the next day and the next day, was a way of dealing with not eternity but persistence in relation to this apparent immutability and strength of the monuments in this other material. So anyway, I'm just going to quickly show some images, and then if any of you have some particular questions about something, you can maybe write it down or mark it, and then I can reply to particular questions if there are any. I'm just going to try to
share, because maybe you don't need, you need administration. Let me check if you need, or just do it.
I don't think I need. Let me see.
Sometimes
no, you disabled attendee screen share. I need a. If it's not complicated, if it's complicated,
no. I switch you as organizer. Now you can.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Okay. I hope it works.
Yes.
So
yes.
this is an image of the work that Dmitry also showed, and it's actually interesting because it's in relation to an equestrian statue, an equestrian statue that is quite new. So it was installed in Bucharest in the 90s, right after the revolution, the Romanian Revolution, and the fall of the Eastern Bloc, in a space that was empty. And I think it was this idea, the authorities thought that they need to fill it up. So they need to fill up this empty space with an image, and they didn't know which image to produce at that point. So they reverted to this image of the Romanian monarchy. And this is a remake. The original equestrian was actually torn down by the communist regime. And apparently, so the legend goes, it was melted into a Lenin statue. And then that was torn down. And then after the 90s, this came up again. I'm not going to comment on the significance and again on the symbolism, but just going to go through some images. So this is from 2011. This is from a work at the Monument to the Battle of the Nations in Leipzig. Again, the sculptures that you see are actually only a bit older than 100 years, but they're sculpted in this aesthetic of the colossi, right? It's almost like Egyptian colossus. And the monument itself also has an interesting history, has been used also by the Nazis to commemorate all sorts of events. And it's actually made in 1912 to commemorate the Prussian victory over Napoleon in 1812, and somehow the birth of the German nation. This is in St. Petersburg, actually, called Soft Power, from a series of additions to public monuments that were commissioned by Manifesta, the public program of Manifesta. And this is with the monument of Catherine the Great, where this link, this super unimportant decorative link in this decorative chain around this, again, vertical structure of noblemen and an emperor. So these links were missing, and I just propose that they're replaced by performers who take on this position of the least important unit in this construction. And everything happens. So this, for example, each performer stays there for a couple of minutes and then moves away, and then someone else comes to take their place. So it's not about enduring also. It's not about being there for 4 hours. I'm not interested in the body becoming completely uncomfortable. I'm interested in sort of comfort, but in an action that can be kept by being the performers being replaced or reoccurring. Also St. Petersburg.
I remember, I've been there.
The Bronze Horseman, yeah. And there's some interesting stories about this, also the Bronze Horseman, because for example, the people that you see in the first image up, actually, they're not all performers. It's the sculpture is in a park, and when I was there, at least, the people were not really allowed to sit on the park. So there was this on the lawn, on the grass in the park. So like a public officer, or not really a policeman, but something like a policeman, would come almost every half an hour and tell people to move away. This was at least the ritual that I caught when I was there. So people would move away, and then after the policeman would be gone, they'd come back and sit again on the grass. But nevertheless, there was this kind of almost absurd thing going on where you had to move away from the grass. And of course, they would also come and check our permission. And this is maybe also an important aspect that I've always tried to work with authorization, so with permits. And I've tried to use the institutional channels that were somehow available to obtain, so to make these things legal. It's not a big deal. Also, I think I'm not a big deal in the sense that I'm not interested in a very open conflict. But it was always a struggle, and you had to resort to all sorts of relations, enabled to get these permits. And so we had an authorization to be on the Thunderstone and around. And at some point, people realized when the policemen kept coming and checking our authorization, that actually that becomes somehow like a space where the authority does not have any power for this particular time. So some people, when the police, the public officers came again to tell people to move away from the lawn in the park, they moved near the monument. So there was this kind of weird space where something was possible for a little while that was not normally possible, and possible also on the Thunderstone and the monument of the Peter the Great. Yeah, so that was somehow interesting as a possibility, or something that I didn't plan, but that somehow happened. And yeah, a sculptural addition to the Lenin monument in Finland Station. This is from Monument to Work, which is it's a monument where there's no other structure. So the monument is the people, and the performers become the memorial. And I think, Dmitry, you were saying you wanted to also ask something about it. Maybe I can say a little bit more about it. It was a work that was commissioned by the Public Art Agency, which is a public collection and a commissioning body in Sweden. And they were interested in thinking about Sweden as a post-industrial society. Of course, there's no post-industrial society really today. I think it's just a term that also the West uses, but we have, creative industries, right? The arts are increasingly, or they're already framed within this notion, and of course, heavy or older types of industries elsewhere. But the idea, what the work does basically is it takes movements that were performed on the factory floor from the 70s onwards, and have disappeared with automation. So the moving body that has somehow contributed to the modernity and to whatever we now discover it was not progress in many ways, gets to also appear and be commemorated. And they have quite a lot of museums of machinery, so industrial machinery, but the bodies of the workers that actually operated and somehow worked together with this machinery, or not, they're not present, or maybe very little in photographs, but the movements have not been commemorated. And basically what I did was take a couple of movements from the factory floor, and they are now performed at a bit distorted and very, very slow, or in a rhythm that is completely different from the conveyor belt and the factory floor, and they become a bit like a ritual, or this movement, this collective movement practice. That is also aesthetic, or it has some form of aesthetic function, but of course it's also a new form of labor in a way, because it gets inscribed into this, let's say immaterial, but very material labor. This is, for example, why I'm also showing this work, which is the Romanian Pavilion in Venice in 2013, is because here, together with Manuel Permuș, it's a work made together with Manuel Permuș, I was also interested, and we were interested in different forms of monumentalities. So the work is called an Immaterial Retrospective of the Venice Biennale, and basically performers, so human bodies, enact works from the whole history of the Venice Biennale since 1895 to today, to 2013. So we thought of monumentality in terms of something historical also. So the history of an institution that has the power to also write art history. And there's a gesture of downscaling or demonumentalizing the very history of a monumental institution. Some of the same, works in the same vein. This is actually a work at another equestrian of the statue of Mannerheim in Helsinki, where basically I was proposing that it's called turning monuments, that some performers support others on this other side of the pedestal. So there's a kind of a shift from a portrait view to a landscape view. And I like that it forced, or it didn't force, but it invited people to tilt their heads. And when you tilt your head and you see things from another perspective, basically you can look at this other image, but then the question kind of falls to the side. So you take it out of the attention, let's say, spot. Parthenon marbles, again, those kind of famous sculptures in the British Museum collection that were looted from the Parthenon. And they're the subject of a repatriation request. They are embodied by performers, so they can cross borders. There's, all sorts of references. Also, I've kept using references to monuments, but sometimes I wasn't interested again in having any form of already existing structure. But here, for example, this work made in New York on the High Line. I was also interested in a relationship again of bodies and architecture and the surrounding verticality and scale of the surrounding architecture. Yeah, I'm just gonna go faster through the images. But I think, yeah. Yeah, so there are monumental structures in all sorts of works, but in the end they're always performed by bodies and by the living. And it's also something that I wanted to say in relation to that. I'm very interested also in the economy that is afforded by the material of the artwork. For example, also the monument to work, it was commissioned by Public Art Agency in Sweden, but it was also acquired. So it is part of their collection, and they are committed to reinstall it frequently. So to let it live and to give it a life again by performing it and by letting it appear again. And they're also installing it this year. And I'm helping with the reinstallation, but it's not my edition anymore. But I think it's interesting because these forms of memorials, let's say, they can also force a different economy. So, you know, you have to hire people. I want people to be paid when they perform also, when they're part of an artwork. And I've also struggled. I mean, as much as I like also guerrilla-like actions, I've also always struggled. And this maybe is also a form of giving into the institutionalization of art, but at the same time, I believe, you know, that institutions have an important role today, or that we have to struggle for institutions and for what they can do still. So I've tried to have work in connection to institutions, and to also, you know, struggle for institutions paying labor and paying performers, so that everyone is hired and everyone can also make a living from these works. And I don't see them only as, let's say, some form of subversive gestures, but I see them also as being part of an economy. And here maybe what you were saying, Dmitry, about commissions, you know, I think it's really important. What are these new commissions and what sort of economy they enable, especially in the art world, where we know, I mean, in terms of public monuments, well, let's say there are site-specific works, but in general, if we speak about art, the medium is quite important politically. There are statistics that show that, you know, the sculpture and painting sells best. So the more you have an object that is fixed, that is easy to transport, or that is easy to store in a free port somewhere, I think the more easily it circulates on the market as an asset. And I'm interested in not producing an asset, in producing a live experience, which always forces a new investment, let's say, and a commitment of an institution to put in resources into paying people also, and into the living, let's say. I think I can stop the share, because maybe it's kind of enough. Yeah. There were also some other works where I'm using also a hologram, and I've also thought about monumentality again in terms of a form of asserting power, but it can also belong to conglomerates of institutions. I think it belongs to the, you know, to finance today. You know, I think the financial district is a monument to the contemporary world, for example. So I'm trying to look at processes and structures that are also not so easily recognizable as, you know, a figurative sculpture. I think there's also some form of animism that is both generative, but also maybe both problematic sometimes in treating the sculpture as the person somehow, in imbuing it with a sort of symbolic power, which it was supposed to have, especially at that time. But I feel like current forms of colonialism and extraction and extractivism are a lot more abstract and harder to grasp and to point to. And this is where I've also somehow I feel like I really, I mean, of course it's super important that a whole history, especially in the West, is being dealt with, but I feel like there's more to be done than just topple a statue. And then, Sadiq Khan or someone just commissioning other ones within the same economical structures, no artist fees or objects that get a lot of resources sucked into them, and the same sort of, let's say, hierarchies and scarce resources, in fact, for the majority of us. So, also to maybe just to say a couple more words also about what you mentioned in the introductory text. I think it's really important that some spaces are left open. So for sure, in my opinion, a lot of monuments could simply be taken down from the pedestals. So I think this is super important, that they're taken down from the pedestals. And people are also in the West, they're quite surprised when they hear about parks, where you have other monuments and statues gathered. And I visited such parks, of course, also in Moscow. So, and then there are some in Taiwan. And so there are all sorts of solutions. To be clear, also, I'm not equating histories. And this is, I think, where we need to be careful. But there are different solutions for dealing with obsolete monuments, let's say, or for monuments that are problematic. But in terms of new commission, I think that either spaces can be left open, and that this is another thing, there's hardly any open public space. Right. So in a way, monuments or spaces for commemoration could also be a site, or they could be spaces that are spared from real estate investments, or from all sorts of other grabbing and claiming of public space for private enterprises today. But I also feel like the state, in a way, and commissioning bodies, they can be involved positively in the production of new forms of commemoration by supporting financially, actually, because I think it's great if people get together and they come out and they are in the street and then they form all sorts of grassroots structures. But in the end, we are living through a global pandemic. In the end, it's also about either universal basic income or some form of understanding worth beyond wage, which I'm totally for, or some form of providing wages and material support. So I think again that commissioning bodies could also be involved in new forms of commemoration and public collective form of thinking about memory and also negotiating history. And it doesn't necessarily have to, doesn't have to be all bad, but it really depends what exactly is it that they commission and how. And maybe we open up a bit.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you tackle that kind of institutional production issue. But one practical thing, can you return me administration right? Because some people still want to join, and I'm right now.
Oh my God.
No, it's not your problem. It looks like it's technical things where only one person, because I gave it to you to share the screen.
Oh my God.
You click me and give me administration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make host.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I don't want this power. Take the power away.
Yeah, you took the power
from me.
Total. Yeah. Thanks again. And we have immediately one lady, Tatiana, ask urgent question before she forget it. So I think we should definitely let Tatiana speak. So Tatiana, please.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I'm just entering the discussion before the event is actually completed in the content, I guess. But I even wanted to ask Dmitry before Alexandra started to talk. So now I have questions for both of you, and maybe it doesn't matter who will answer actually. But it's quite pragmatic from my side, because I'm going to complete my monograph, which is connected with visual communication and international relations, politics, etc. And this kind of performances, actually, and you also both stressed that it has kind of symbolic and kind of visual aspects, and I would like to ask if you would recommend some kind of really relative authors besides mentioned Henri Lefebvre and Zygmunt Gedding. It's just kind of for theoretical conceptualization. And one more question is not about their names actually and writers, but about kind of sort of theoretical conceptualization of one of the way of conceptualization as I'm thinking now. Could you agree or disagree with idea if it is possible to describe or try to conceptualize it in the way of bioactivism, for example, especially this question is more
bioactivism.
Bioactivism. It's
What's that?
tactical bioactivism. There is a kind of a concept. It's not widespread yet, but I'm dealing with it sometimes. So I just think that maybe Alexandra mentioned it, this kind of biological, but it's really something how activism is interconnected with biological body, yeah, and also has a kind of political as well, but a kind of social attempts to kind of to make some kind of social impact on you know, on reconfiguration of at least perception of the monuments. In this case, of course, it's not only relative to monuments. So would you agree? Is it possible to try to conceptualize it via this tactical bioactivism? Thank you very much.
Welcome. So Alexandra, you start or?
I don't, or I can, maybe try to grasp with this concept of bioact, or if you, Dmitry, if you have a clear...
you know, I have immediate maybe response, because for me, maybe it's return back the question to Tatiana, because for me right now, what is at stake? It's a certain articulation from human to biological. And for me, it's a very disturbing tendency. You know, with all that kind of new materialism, we less and less speak about humans, we speak about biological agglomerations or composition, like a little bit that agency theory, shifting us more and more from that reconsideration, what can be vocation of the humans in relation to other non-human and other agencies, but at the same time, even articulation. For example, when Elon Musk right now speak about future of humankind, he speaks about composition between biological and technical devices, but not from human, not about human. So it's very interesting turn in discourse, and I see that in most cases which we demonstrated today, and I would say that for me the work of Alexandra is very human. It's human body, not biological body. Yeah. Of course, you can also open question how we consider the crowd. It's a human crowd or biological crowd. So that's, for me, it's a question of terms. That's why, frankly to say, I've never heard anything about bioactivism. So a completely new term for me. And in relation to the beginning of your question, yeah, actually there are plenty of sources. I hope I can share and maybe collect, because right now I have to go into certain kind of...
I might write you probably, or I will find you.
Yeah, no, if you are on this list, so I can share it publicly, yes. But I definitely would recommend Gal Kieran, his book on partisan monuments, which I also make as a recommendation in my writing. So, because I think right now we are too much obsessed, because it deserves our attention right now, because it's happening in front of our eyes with urgency and incredible energy, what happened in US. But at the same time, the issue of monumentality, for me, very interesting to approach from post-socialist, post-communist perspective, which brings incredibly deep dimension, which unfortunately in many discussion on the toppling of the monument of US, I don't see. So that's my subjective position, speaking on that from that post-Soviet perspective. Alexandra also. So Alexandra, maybe you can add something.
In relation to the monuments, of course, for example, the whole form of monumentality that also emerged in former Yugoslavia is quite interesting, you know, in terms of something that is both natural, is both abstract, and that is meant to represent actually communist monuments. And this is something, you know, I saw an exhibition at the moment, there was no mention, you know, not even of the fact that they're anti-fascists also, or let's say, but it was a very nice exhibition and very well documented. But I think this political dimension somehow was very much erased. So everyone was focusing on the aesthetics, but the fact that they are actually monuments to communist partisans who fought or managed in that territory at least to overcome fascism is quite important. And I think that their aesthetics also says something about the possibility of politics in this sort of non-aligned form of socialism. So I agree that I also feel at some point that the discussion around also the Confederate monuments and so on is quite rudimentary in a way. So it's really, it's also, I think it comes very late, but this is part of the problem in a way, that it's so late that you deal with the colonial history. I also want to say something, and I also have some sources. I think there's an interesting author, Mehtil Duidrich, that writes interesting things about contemporary forms of monumentality. But I can maybe also send to Dmitry. It's easier to.
Yeah,
please.
If you have your own articles or kind of reflections, it might be interesting.
And just to say something quickly, sorry, about maybe bioactivism. I've also never heard the term, but maybe also to respond a bit to Dmitry, because in my work and also more recent works, I'm also quite concerned with placing the human in relation to other life forms. I think there's a problem of language, that the very term of post-human is very misleading. I think this is also maybe what you're reacting to, because post-human, I think it mostly has to do with post-humanism. When you think of humanism in this enlightenment sense of separation of nature from culture and so on, but post-human I think is a bad term. I like to think of more than human. Which doesn't mean that you take the humans out of the equation, but that you understand the humans in relation to many things. And actually, new forms of materialist thinking, including feminist thinking, are very much opposed to transhumanism, which is what I think you were talking about when you talk about Elon Musk. And it's not about the relationship of the human with technology, which is this cannot be the scope of the discussion here, because it's gonna go. It's complicated, but we are also technological beings. But it's a certain way of seeing bodies and matter, which transhumanism kind of reduces to this very basic and also old school wrong cognitivism, where we are the mind. And you see all these American science fiction movies where you can just, you take the human and you upload it and you put it in a ball or in a chip on it. And this is you.
This case,
and it's like, so the whole material aspect of being embodied, and this is actually what some new materialisms, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I've read some interesting texts, are insisting on actually on the materiality of embodiment, which is also what makes us human. So which is also what doesn't make us prone to be put on a chip. And which also is what relates us to other life forms. And it's impossible to escape this relation. And I think this is a moment where it's becoming even more obvious how much we are related to other living and non-living biologies. Yeah, so just that.
We receive one more question for Catherine Cutler. Catherine, please, join.
I just wanted to ask, do you always use trained dancers or bodies to create your works? And if you do, how does this change the community, the conversation, and the political potential around and of what you make together?
No, I don't always use trained dancers. There are different works that also maybe have different interests. even if most of the works are with live performers, there are also some works again with other objects, and in general they try to do different things. So there was also this work, I think the documentation was in the presentation of the assembly, Tilted Arc, which is basically a reconstruction of a Richard Serra work in steel, where I'm replacing the steel, the material, with live presence. So it affords different choreography, and it creates this porous structure that you can negotiate with, because it's in the public space, and somehow the very idea of the public space is to afford negotiation. And there, for example, there's a wide variety of people participating, including some passersby. They just wanted to join. There were also a couple of performers that were actually immigrants from Eritrea, and then they had a very complicated status. The work was made in Switzerland, and it was interesting because can you still hear me? Or? Yeah, okay, because I think yeah, something or you were muted. And I think it was a very nice group, because also their feedback was that they felt very good being able to be present in the middle of the city in this block of people with some of them were also professional dancers, some were skaters, so it was a very mixed group, and to make this sort of common front. And they felt very strong and very powerful in this line, which was able to direct also cars because of this kind of collective presence. So no, it's not always dancers, but I do also use their works that mix, let's say, also professional dancers with actors or singers and even amateurs. I think I'm interested in a little bit of let's say a messy aesthetic. Or I was trained in ballet, you know, and contemporary, in classical dance, and then in contemporary dance. But I've tried to move away from this imperial aesthetics somehow, you know, and the kinestem of classical ballet, which funny enough became also the kinestem of the Soviet. It was very weird how ballet, which was this monarchic ordering of the body movement, kind of became kind of a Soviet export. Anyway, but yeah, I try to accommodate all sorts of bodies in the works. It's never about something becoming very, very open, but the presences and the personalities and the bodies of the performers always also inform the work. So I'm definitely taking that into account, and I think it also has to do again with materialism. So the fact that I don't come, of course I have a concept, and I train and I try things on myself at home, and for the works that way you can actually do things at home or in the studio. But the work or my idea always changes in the encounter with the bodies of the performers, who are not always professionals. Kind of obvious.
We have a question from Nikolai Aleynikov, member of our collective. So, and I think he has a question to Alice. Nico, please, yeah.
It's just a quick question. Why monumentality? What is monumental, and how to turn out monumentality in a different way? What do you think about, like, how it is important right now? Because we see monuments are getting down. For now, what is monumentality for you personally as an artist who works with the monumentality as a question? So what it is for you?
Thank you.
Or do you want to, is it to me? Or
no, it's
it's to Alexandra, specifically. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, Dmitry is already. Yeah, I mean, I've tried to hint at this. I think it becomes a complicated term. I think also in this 9 points on monumentality of Gideon and Fernand Léger, they say at some point that modernity cannot have monuments, because monuments somehow should represent the sort of unified spirit of an age. And modernity is this fragmented space, you know, or atomized experiences where you cannot really produce the monumental anymore. But if you think about it in terms of huge structures of manifested power, that they're not, they don't need to necessarily be just symbolic. Again, when I gave the example of the financial district in London, you know, maybe after the statue of a slave trader, maybe that is where you need to look at where colonial wealth has been sucked in and is being multiplied. I feel, you know, that certain technologies of calculation today also have this sort of monumental presence somehow in our lives. So I think it's always something that has to do with scale and scale also in terms of insidiousness and infiltration and the capacity to be part of our lives. Maybe it's extending the concept too much. It also has to do, of course, with the, but I think it's helpful. And I think it also has to do still with very concrete structures. So for example, I'm quite intrigued, you know, by so many museums and big art institutions that have fired so many workers now with the pandemics. And still they, you know, they have these huge buildings. These huge monumental cathedral-like buildings for the arts that cannot be, I mean, they were made for art, but then now, for example, they almost are left without people to operate or to be able to produce the program. And I've been looking, especially in the United States, where this whole model of financing the arts and museums that has a lot to do with endowments. Maybe you've heard about this concept of an endowment. Is all these big museums, they have such big endowments, but they can't take any money from the endowments. And endowments are usually, they're like capital, and it's money that is meant to produce more money. So you can only spend the money that the endowment produces. It's an investment. It's the money you get to invest. And so, for example, buildings are also usually financed by private collectors. And I know institutions, you know, that got gifted this 500 million building, you know, but that now don't have money to pay salaries because you cannot touch the building. And because donations come for the building, right, for this monumental structure to house the art, but not for the people. Not for the humans who produce it or who are supposed to, you know, to
in the same time, we have this approach from completely different artists, like Nikita Kadan was also, or Mykola Ridny from Ukraine, when the Leninopad started to happen, the statues, the sculptures of Lenin started to fall down after the Ukraine Orange Revolution, as we call it. And in the same time, Kara Walker made this sugar baby in the monumental Sphinx parody, in a way. So like this tension of like reclaiming monumentality in a way, right? It happened, and what do we do with this now? What we can monumentalize, and in which ways, and by which means, and who is the actor, who is the protagonist of this monumentality? I'm really wondering, because this is a very tangible thing. We are like, after all these monuments, we need other types of monumentality. And what is that? Because Kara Walker and Nikita and Mykola, they really showed us the way to monumentalize what is not there yet, and how to re-monumentalize, how to reflect, how to rebuild, how to make it like major thing, and what and how, and who.
I think we need to rebuild without re-monumentalizing. This is my personal opinion. I don't think we need more grand scale monuments. I think that the scale situation, the hierarchy and the fascination with a big object is part of the problem. So maybe if we are to rethink monumentality, we also see it a bit on a more horizontal plane, and in terms of dynamics. This is why I'm also interested in working with the human scale and with also maybe with this relationship with the natural, rather than taking and shaping materials in this other huge big forms that are supposed to symbolize what, you know. So I think in a way, let's say, I'm not sure you can dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. I think maybe aesthetics and again questions of material and scale are somehow part of the problem. And I'm not sure we need new forms of monumentality. That's what I would say. I think we need memorials, but memorials are different. So ways to look at history and to commemorate this we need, but the monumental, also the very idea of eternity. I think at the moment, if we look at the situation in which we are now, how the hell can you think about eternity anymore? Really, I mean, yeah.
I have a comment on what Nikolai said, but first I would like to give a floor to Zenio, who asked for a question. Yeah. Okay, Zenio, please.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, sorry, I'm in the dark, so it's not going to make any difference if I open my camera.
No, yeah, it's much better.
You know, like people were...
Oh.
It did, okay.
Oh yeah, maybe.
During the Gezi uprising, when people claim this public space, there was also a history came out that the park that we were defending was built on a old Armenian cemetery. So it was also pointing at a really brutal history in that public space. So some people wanted to create this sort of, let's say, monument for this loss of the graveyard. But the organization of our Armenian friends said that if you are not going to be able to protect this monument, then don't do it. So that was one of the moments I had to reflect on this counter monuments at that point, that when police is going to come there and clear everything and we won't be able to protect this or from the...
Oh. Then you stop. Yeah. Maybe you'd better use without video because your line is weak.
Okay, where did you lost me?
Just the last few words.
Yeah.
Okay,
last few words about when activists can't protect that new monument.
I mean,
from police.
From the police or from the fascists. So that was one of the reflection moments for me about the counter monuments or this kind of temporary commemorations of a lost history.
Yeah, that's serious. You finished, Zenia? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. We have one more question, Gabriella, and I delay my comment. Yeah. Gabriella, please.
Yeah, well, it's not really a question, but it's just some things I've been, thinking while we were speaking. And so one is the iconoclastic action that's going on now with Black Lives Matter. And well, one thing is that symbols cannot be neutral for themselves. They never are. So it is really, when we get to, when we occupy the common space with symbols that a community does not perceive as owning those symbols anymore or holding those symbols anymore, because they really sort of cry against the identity of the community because our societies change, evolve, then I see a point there. And another thing that is open now is the question of the symbol as itself. Like, I was working and reading what was going on in France with the Gilets jaunes during the COVID, and we have the symbol of the masks that we are all invited to wear. And Gilets jaunes were protesting into the street, and they were wearing the masks. And there was the police declared that they will not go against protestants with tear gas, because tear gas was dangerous for COVID, because it would damage respiratory tract. So they said that they will use the electric shot instead of tear gas. So we see how a symbol, which is the mask, that is healthy, protects me, is also perceived by the controlling surveillance as a barrier against which I cannot perform my control. So I use another tool. So this is really powerful. This moment in time, how symbols are very, very alive. And there is also another thing. I am also a choreographer. I come from the body. I come from performativity of the body. But it's also another open question is when reality becomes more performative than performance itself. I was working during the month before Bataclan happened on this concept, and then you really have to question yourself, what can my performance do when the reality around me is more performative? It cries 10,000 more. It tells much more than what an actual act can say. So this is another question on the carpet. And another thing is that the legal illegal questions, because I do really sort of feel always this very difficult relationship with the institutions as such, because for what you told about your performance, for me the most interesting part was that of the dialogue between the policeman that was asking you for papers. I mean, this is for me the real core of the performance itself. Like really the performative act stays there in the point where the art becomes unsettling for the given order. And another thing that I was thinking about the question raised by Tatiana about the bioactivism, we sort of approached also, I don't know if in the theoretical terms that she's referring to, but we discussed this in our pre-discussions meetings when everything was happening and we were meeting and trying to connect online. And there will be a session, and there is also an article on the IRI website about art, and by Marco Baravalle, and he is really raising the question that we in the art sector should really ask the question on what is our ecological imprint in the system. The question of the dimension, the question of the scale is now political, and it does matter because we're not neutral anymore. Like no one can assume to do anything from a position that is not claiming its way on a sort of social order that is so in such a high difficulty. So Marco is addressing also, let's ask ourselves, in being artists, how do we really have sort of also feeded the system by moving so much, by traveling a lot, by being a week here, a week there. We have really sort of assumed, we should assume our responsibility on how we've sort of inflated this system. And I think that in the post-COVID area, those discourses will be really and should remain on the front and should really inform our actions. Yeah, and so I was sort of like really. So maybe Tatiana can also take a look at the article of Marco and then maybe join the next meeting on art for UBI. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriela, for your very important comment. Yeah, Tatiana said that she was joined. I'm sorry, it's a little bit complicated to check chat and also follow this discussion. But actually,
sorry, maybe just I just wanted to, quickly
please.
just 2 words.
Please.
Not all performances do the same thing. So the performative is not this one big thing that it can be this or that. Of course, the political realm, I mean, there are a lot of artists who have actually dealt very directly from the yes men, to a lot of artists who have dealt with the increasingly spectacular nature of politics and of the media and so on. So I think, on the other hand, the role of the artworks. So again, I don't see performance as some sort of, performance is many things. It has different genealogies and so on. But the role of artworks are precisely to challenge and to deconstruct, or maybe to create openings into this generalized spectacle, and to help with different and more subtle and more complex perspectives. So not everything is changing in very obvious ways, and not everything is already, let's say, resolved within the general media or the public space or the political. So we need, I do believe we need the art space to precisely to unpack what the other spaces offer us. Yeah. So I think that just that.
Thank you. Any more questions, or should can I do, there are something in the chat? Not much. Yeah. Actually, I would like to problematize maybe that the issue of that political notion of the monument through one of that example, because we very often consider monumentality with idea of that power representation. But at the same time, it was very important turn which happened after Second World War and after Holocaust, when actually start to appear monuments to the victims, and especially to the Jews, to homosexuals, to Romas, who actually died, perished through that. And it was actually a radical challenge, how to represent unrepresentable, unimaginable. So that scale. And then come again that it was also the discussion between modernity split it in many kind of scattered landscape of different identities, but then the challenge of Holocaust, it was kind of how to represent that kind of common collapse, that catastrophe. So, and actually it comes very close to original idea, what is monumentality? It's monumentality about that issue about how we consider sublime. And here we come to very serious issue, because that discourse was immediately again instrumentalized, particularly in Germany, by the power, where the collective feeling of the guilt became kind of general, kind of consensus idea, and then it created kind of, as you said, enormous commission like Jewish Memorial in Berlin, and before it was also big tradition in Soviet monumental culture, also monument.
One important thing is just like a little historical remark that Yad Vashem, that is the most monumental piece to commemorate the Jewish loss of their people during the World War II, was commissioned in 1942. So like commemoration starting before commemorating. So that really complicated a little bit the whole thing, that Alain Badiou adds to the discourse of what is monumental now. So, and what is monumental is what monumental was, and how the monumentality produced. which gives more complexity to the question that we are discussing today. That what can really destruct or deconstruct the power wheel of commemoration, and how commemoration can happen from below. For me, personally, this is the major question as such. So.
Okay, sorry, you interrupted me quite radically, but anyway. So, and then right now, I think we are challenged because a lot of the disadvantaged group comes in a very complex relation. Like I mentioned that new commission for that monument in near Louvre in France to victims of racism. And I guess it will be more and more that kind of very ambivalent situation where artists would be challenged because it will be again the same economy as you mentioned of that big names and big money and so on. But at the same time, people also through that outer practice, and for me also sometimes, because I would even maybe to say, not radically, but at the same time to question that kind of whole concept of monumentality, that Stapelsteine, that small things which you put on a pavement because of that mass implementation and sometimes realized by people from below, actually become kind of incredibly important monumental elaboration. Or Johann Gertz, who also worked a lot with that kind of invisible monuments, invisible monumentality. Or, for example, yeah, actually also come to my mind, I just briefly showed this Chilean, that red cupola.
Alfredo Haar.
Alfredo Haar, yeah, Alfredo Haar. It's also that kind of semi-performative, really stable manifestation could be really taken into serious account and maybe developed more. So I'm sure that right now, through that kind of toppling the statues and reconsideration of the past will definitely be facing with the new forms of commemoration from both sides, from below and from above, in a very complex negotiation. So that's my vision. Yes, Alexandra, please.
I just wanted to say something quickly. I think, for example, of course, the sort of unitary gestures of commemoration are important. At the same time, if we were to speak about the Louvre, and I think introducing, and the other former colonial empires and countries as well, introducing, you know, colonial history in school curriculums and in the universities is maybe a lot more efficient than the one memorial or the one gesture somewhere at some point. Having those schools and universities free to attend, paying the teachers well. So I think this is a process that has to infiltrate many levels. It's not just about producing one object or one action or one gesture, but yeah, I think commemoration can come in different ways, and it has to be part of everyday life also, especially when it comes to such important historical events and that still shape how we function and who we are somehow today. So just that.
Yeah, I think it was really nice. So I think we should really fight on many fronts and actually, but build them together. So actually, I would also hardly imagine right now any kind of commissions which make sense without popular participation, and how artists manage to engage that redistribution of sources, redistribution of space. I think it could be main ethical, and also maybe, as it was mentioned by Gabriela, ecological question, ecological of production, which comes in that very intense participatory way with the people who are fighting for that.
It was also already taken on for a while already, for
yes,
example,
absolutely.
The imprint of the art world. But at the same time, you know, if so many people are able to fly private jets, And then you know the artists who maybe travel from one place to another, because you know if they would be paid a lot, they could just do one commission a year, so they wouldn't need to fly around so much. So everything actually is, I think, a bit more complicated.
I think we get nice final word from Ella, who said from commemoration to commemoration. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay,
Nice
guys, if you don't have urgent words, I'm absolutely respect that actually Zoom, we should be really keep our personal health and ecology, and more than 2 hours it will really exhausting, and we should save us for something else life. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you don't have, thank you so much, Alexandra.
Thank
It
you.
was really
Thanks,
great
everyone.
evening
Also.
with you and with everyone, and I hope we continue, and thanks so much. Yeah. And
Thanks.
you are again welcome to School of Mutation by Iri, and to many iteration. Check the program online and you receive newsletter every Monday. You want to say something, Gabriela, at the end? I just saw you. You just jumped from the duck. Okay. Thank you so much. And
Bye. Thank you.
and I stop recording and say goodbye.